Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Michael Tovell, one of our psychologists here at Masters. My name is Matthew. I'm part of the admin team. Michael, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Matthew. How are you doing?
Well, I'm feeling a little anxious. I'm just kidding. But I thought that'd be a fun way to start this topic, which is today we're going to talk about anxiety, specifically what's
Mm,
stress, what's anxiety, and then where does it become a disorder? And Michael, I
mm.
know that you work with a lot of clients that are struggling with anxiety. First, just maybe to introduce everybody, what types of clients do you work with? And how does anxiety typically come up inside the therapy room?
That's a great question. I would say that I work mostly with young adults, and there's pretty big range. As young as probably 10, and I've had people up to 8.
And, and does anxiety look the same throughout that whole age demographic, or does anxiety manifest differently in a 21-year-old versus an
Oh, that's a
80-year-old?
great question. Oh, that's a really good question. I would say that it does. It depends a lot on the person. It's a lot of an individual experience. So it's not necessarily so much about age, but sometimes people that are a little older have navigated it a bit longer, which could mean that they actually experience it even harder and they're more kind of worn down by the anxiety. And some of them have learned to actually over time get better. And so
Right.
they're like, they've been down that road. They know how to kind of cope with it a little bit better. And so they've got some strategies in place already because they've probably been seeing a few people and looking online and doing all those things.
One of the topics I talk with a lot of people like me that are not therapists, I'm a non-therapist, not a psychologist. People say I'm anxious or I'm stressed. What are some of the misconceptions generally, culturally, around the topic of anxiety?
I think there are some misconceptions. And I think to me, probably the biggest misconception is that anxiety is something that we need to get rid of. And so
Mm,
there is a place where anxiety is inhibiting your life and you need to deal with it. But on the
interesting.
other hand, anxiety is not supposed to totally go. And so we need to understand the purpose of anxiety. So I kind of, even in an externalized type of review, it's kind of like a friend that's telling you, like, look out, there's danger here. Because sometimes we're seeing danger where there isn't, but sometimes we do need to see danger. And so anxiety serves the purpose of sharpening our focus. It shows us like, oh, there might be something there that I need to look out for. So part of the process is saying, is this real danger or is this perceived danger? And
Huh.
so that's partly what we need to be asking ourselves when we go through kind of just reflecting on the anxiety itself. But understanding that it's part of our life, that's what sharpens us. A couple examples I give to clients all the time is when you're writing a test, if you go in there with a really lackadaisical attitude, you haven't studied hard, you don't care, probably you're not going to do very well. So it's a problem when anxiety takes over and you can't focus and the whole room seems bright and it's a really tough thing to even concentrate on a question, but it does sharpen our focus. So that's one place that I would say is a really good example for public speaking. We don't like that nervousness, but it does sharpen us so that we go up there and try to do our best too. So hopefully it's just helping us and not hindering it. We have to accept that anxiety is an important part of our life.
And that's really interesting. I know many people experience anxiety attacks, or the anxiety becomes almost debilitating.
Yes.
So I hear you saying, it's important, but there's almost like this point where it becomes debilitating. What causes a natural awareness system like anxiety to become debilitating?
Well, that can be a lot of different things. So obviously the chemicals in our body, and it can be something to do with even sleep and nutrition and all of those kinds of things. But a lot of it is actually our own perceptions about anxiety because
Hmm.
we have a metacognitive level of anxiety when we're worried about worry, if that makes sense. And so when we're really stressing out and thinking like, oh, what if I get anxious? That's going to exacerbate it and make it feel a lot stronger than it would otherwise. If we say, okay, I've got some anxiety, I need to take a deep breath, everything's going to be fine, probably you're going to react a lot differently in that situation than somebody that's like, oh my goodness, I had an anxiety attack. What if that happens again? You're on this hyper alert, hyper vigilant state. And so then when it starts to happen, you think, this is going to be overwhelming and I can't do this. So a lot of it is just being able to talk through things, use the tools in our toolbox to just take that deep breath and be able to navigate it. Say, okay, done
Hmm.
before.
Yeah, I like that from a non-therapist's perspective. What's the difference between stress and anxiety? And then this
Mm,
concept of GAD or generalized anxiety disorder.
great question. And I mean, there can be some overlap in that. But stress is when something is externally acting on us and we're feeling run down, or we're feeling like there's too much to handle. We're feeling that pressure from life. And so that's when we feel stressed. And maybe we just need to take a break. We just need to, because I mean, that can lead to things like burnout and all of that kind of stuff where you're feeling just overwhelmed. Anxiety, again, and I did kind of speak to that, but it is a bit of that warning system. Is there danger involved here? Is there something that we need to be looking out for? So anxiety is always alerting us to something, whereas stress is that external force and probably things that we're trying to deal with rather than, is this actually a danger or not? And so when it gets to the level of generalized anxiety disorder, a lot of people like to say that they have GAD when they don't. Like, that can be very debilitating when you get to that level. But general anxiety disorder, the issue with that is we're not anxious about anything that we can actually identify. It's just a generalized, we've got this constant sense of anxiety. We're in this, and again, hyper-vigilant state where we're always kind of looking out for danger, and everything is just making us feel overwhelmed. And so everything feels dangerous. And then your limbic system is going off, and so you're in just kind of a survival mode. And so that can be really tough to navigate. But again, even with that, when you have these coping strategies, when you know that anxiety is part of your life and you accept part of that and say that I can deal with anxiety, part of that is a confidence to say that I can do this. I know that I've got skills. And so when we have that already in place, we're less likely to get overwhelmed by it.
Interesting. And not become debilitated by that anxiety. I think one of my follow-up questions, we talk about coping strategies. Maybe there's healthy coping strategies. There's negative coping strategies. I guess maybe let's start with the negative. What are some of the negative coping strategies that may be an indicator? Maybe I'm actually struggling with anxiety and maybe I need some help here.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of them is basically getting into our own heads and ruminating and saying, like, I need to figure everything out. So I've talked to clients quite a bit about this lately, actually. It's coming up more and more. Part of life, I think, is just accepting that anxiety is part of our life, like I already mentioned, but also that we don't need to figure everything out. And it'd be a little bit of a double-edged sword with people that are highly intelligent. With my intelligent clients, I say, it's great that you're so intelligent, but at the same time, it feels like everything should make sense. And I should be able to figure this out, but I can't. I think we need to leave room for some of the mysteries of life, some of the unknown, some of the things that maybe we aren't supposed to be able to figure out. But I know that's something that I struggle with too, is I want to make sense of this. I want to make sure that I've got this all figured out. And I think when we can come to the place that say, I don't need to have everything figured out, I think there's a lot of release in that.
Yeah. So ruminating, I know I've struggled with ruminating before. I'll think and think and think and think on that same topic.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess the cynic in me would say, isn't that a good way of trying to figure out a solution? Like where does it cross the line between me trying to approach a situation and find a solution, and where does it cross over into rumination and unhealthy?
That is a really good question too. So here's when I'm going to get into a little bit of strategizing too. I think it's really important to get this stuff out. When stuff is going around and around in our brains, sometimes it's not that easy to just differentiate and say, okay, what are the actual points here? Mm-hmm. And so with anxiety, I find it can be very helpful to write down, okay, what am I anxious about? Is there actually a step I can take for this or not? Because there's a certain amount, now we're getting into fear, but we want to control it. Right. And so there's certain things that we can't control. So that's another part, and maybe that's a different discussion for a different day. But there are certain things that you can write down and say, okay, this is something that's on my mind. I'm anxious about it. Is there a tangible step that I need to take? And so that can give us that next step that says, okay, I've got a plan in place here. I don't need to keep going, because we need to short circuit that by actually taking all these things that are pinballing around without any conclusions and say, like, I need to take this to a next step so they've actually taken some action. Otherwise, it's just, we get it. And one of the clues that you're ruminating too much is the what if. An interesting part about that too that I talk about, it's interesting that our what if statements always end with negatives. Mm-hmm. I challenge my clients to say, let's write down some what ifs that actually end in something positive. Right. What if I go to the party and I make lots of friends? What if I go to the party and I feel like this is just a great place of connection for me? Instead, we tend to say, what if nobody likes me? What if I don't talk to anyone? What if I feel embarrassed all night? What if people think I'm not good looking enough, or I'm not fun enough, or whatever it is? So that's what I would say when we're ruminating. It's just when we're sitting there and the anxiety is just going around and around. You just feel that buzz in your body. One thing is say, okay, let's write it down. Let's get this stuff out. The other thing is sometimes we just need to get away from that and do something meaningful, not something
Mm,
just to escape, but something to ourselves and say, okay, I got this on my mind. But right now, maybe I just take a little walk, calm down a little bit, and then I'm going to be able to think.
wow. That's amazing. I couldn't agree with you more. When we're catastrophizing or when we're ruminating, the what ifs are always negative. Why is that? I mean, why are we so biased to negative ruminations versus positive ruminations?
Another great question. I would say the main reason is we're trying to prepare ourselves. We're
Mm.
saying something bad happens, I need to be prepared. But the problem with it is often, usually, most of the time, things don't go nearly as bad as we predict they're going to. And catastrophizing is a great word. I use it all the time. That's just thinking the worst is going to happen. So in the process of trying to prepare ourselves for that, we're actually putting our minds and our bodies through the stress of that situation without it even happening. And so what I say to clients is you're ruining your present hypothesizing about your future. And so
Wow.
is that really a helpful thing for us? And one of the things I like to do is give examples of things that you can't prepare for that you just handle. I usually say to people, you're an intelligent person. Usually they are. And I say, if you get in a car accident, I'm willing to bet that you hadn't been planning that for days. What if I get in a car accident today? I need to do this. And what if it goes like this? I said, no, you get out of the car, you talk to the person, you exchange information, you do all the steps you need to do. Maybe you're reporting it to the police, whatever you need to do. You don't freeze and just like, oh man, I didn't prepare for this. So some of these things we're able to read and react when the time comes. So let's have some more faith in ourselves that we're going to be able to do that. We tend to underestimate our ability to think on our feet and to do the things that we need to.
And then, Michael, last question for you is someone maybe watching this video, reading this article, or they're just going, am I at the point where I actually need to get help? Professional help from someone like yourself, a psychologist, counselor, therapist. What would be your response to someone in that situation?
Yeah, I would say when it's inhibiting your life. So some of the things that we're going to look for is it affecting your sleep? First of all, because sleep is very important. And that can be a challenging thing to talk to clients about because if they're not sleeping well, I don't want to add to the stress of that. But there are things we can do to sleep better. And so that would be one of the things for sure. And if you're going through these situations and you feel like you're just not being yourself, and like we said, your limbic system's engaged, and you kind of feel like you're in survival mode where everything's just overwhelming you, right? And I think those are the times when you say, okay, I got too much anxiety going on here. I need to be able to just take this down a notch. So it's probably good to go. And the fact is, when you come and see somebody, a lot of the healing, most of the healing that happens is through the relationship itself. When you can go and talk to somebody that has an objective point of view, doesn't know your history, doesn't know any of that stuff, you get to just come up, open yourself up, talk about what's going on in your life and have somebody just sit with you through that. It's incredibly powerful. Not every person is going to connect with every counselor. But when you do, there's something that's really powerful in that. And we say the relationship is the agent. That's the main agent of change. So it's more than even the skill part of it. It's just having somebody. And in this day and age, I think everybody would probably agree that listening has become a great skill, which it never really used to be. But I feel like here people are so busy and quite often so self-focused that they're not necessarily able to even engage and listen to the other person very well. So that's our job.
Wow.
That's what I would.
And I can say that you and all of the other therapists that we work with and the therapists I've engaged professionally, you guys really are incredible listeners, active listeners. Thank you so much for your time today, Michael. It was a privilege to hear more about you and get to know more about anxiety. If you want to connect with Michael, you can get more information about him at our website at masterscounseling.com. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Absolutely. You too. Thanks, man.